Hey guys, I actually did it. I created a blue ball python.
Every single day, I'm gonna make something great. Don't stop, don't stop, don't stop. This game ain't nothing, this game ain't nothing. On my way to the top, I love this money, just set it on fire, Don't mean nothing, here's one for the night. Don't waste my time,
Hey guys, Ron here with BBM Reptiles. Thank you again for joining me for another chapter in this crazy adventure, what I call reptile keeping. We all know that basically reptiles, especially ball pythons, there's always something new that comes out each year. And because there's something new each year, it's hard to keep up with it. And especially when you're starting new in this hobby. In this video, I wanted to break down the codoms, the dominants, and the recessives. Because these are different terminologies that sometimes it's hard to explain. But when you get the basic idea, you know more or less the path that you'd want to take. Okay guys, in this scenario, I wanted to actually give a visualization of each of the terms, which would be dominant, codominant, and recessive genes, and how each morph falls into those categories. And what we're going to do is basically, I'm going to put these flashcards so I can give you a visual idea of the examples that I'm presenting. Just to give you an idea, the white will represent a normal or a classic ball python, and I'm going off of a 4-egg clutch, so my ratio will be actually of 4 eggs. So when I talk about probabilities, we're talking about odds. We're talking about more or less how we have seen the trend of how the offsprings actually comes out when we breed these certain type of mutations. Again, white will represent a normal ball python, and I'm going by a 4-egg clutch. Now, we're going to start off with the dominant genes. Dominant genes are pinstriped spiders and calicos, and those are the genes that basically they cannot express themselves in a superform version. To give you an example, the gene for the dominant that I'm going to talk about right now is going to be the calico. Now, if we were to take that calico or that dominant gene and we were to breed it to another calico, in this scenario, we have a 75% probability of producing calicos and a 25% chance of producing a normal. In other words, out of a clutch of 4 eggs, one of them will be normals and 3 of the eggs will be calicos. In that same scenario, if I was to take a calico and I was to breed it to a normal, then basically in that scenario, I would have a 50% chance of producing calicos and a 50% chance of producing normals. Now, that is that. Now we're going to jump into a little bit more details with the codominants. Now the codominants, basically, those are pastels, fires, cinnamon, black pastel, bananas. And for this example, we're going to use fire as the example for the codominant gene. Now, if I was to take a fire and I bred it to a normal, there is a 50% probabilities that I will be producing fires and a 50% chance that I will be producing normal ball pythons. Now, in the same scenario, if I was to take that fire and bred it to another fire, then I would have a 50% chance of producing fire, a 25% chance of producing a normal, and from that scenario, fire to fire, I have a 25% chance of producing a super fire. Now, the super fire is a super form of the codom, and that was the difference between the dominants and the codoms. With a codom in the super form, you can actually visually see the difference of the effect of that super form versus the normal form of the fire. Now, if I was to take a super fire and I bred it to the fire, in that scenario, I should be proving out of a clutch of 4, 2 fires and 2 supers. And in the codom theory, if I was to basically breed a super to a super, then basically everything that produces out of that clutch would be a super. Now that is the codom. Now we're going to go into my favorite, the recessives. Now, the recessives, they're a lot more complicated than what the codoms and dominants are, only because they are a long-term project, and some breeders or some beginners, they'll skip that avenue only because how long that project actually takes to prove out. And I'll explain why. If I was to take a visual recessive, now those recessives, it could be an albino, clown, piebald, ultramel, hypo, but in this example, we are talking about clown. Oh, excuse me. You see, I got the ringtone on my phone of my intro. Sorry about that. Okay, again, in the recessives, we're going to use the clown as the example, and I'm so committed with my intro song. I'm sorry. Anyway, we have the clown, and we're going to breed it to another clown. These are two visual recessive genes. In that scenario of a clutch of 4, everything we produce will be visual clowns. Now that's recessive to recessive. We're not talking about recessive to a normal or anything else. We're talking about a clown to a clown. Everything it will produce will be the visual form of itself, which would be more clowns. Now, in that scenario, if we were to take a recessive gene and we were to breed it to a normal, if we were to breed it to a normal, in that scenario, basically, we will be producing normal looking snakes. They will not carry the visual trait of the clown. They would only carry the visual trait of the normal ball python, but within that normal trait, it would carry the hets or the gene of the clown, but it would not express itself. It would basically be a normal ball python carrying the gene for the clown. This scenario, this is what we call a 100% het. 100% het meaning that it came from a visual parent or dame, but it came from visual parent that was bred to a normal ball python. This is the only way you can actually produce 100% hets. Now, if I was to take that sibling or another 100% het that is the same het or that carries the same gene of the recessive that I want to use, but in this example we're talking about clown. If I was to take a recessive clown, visual clown, and I was to breed it to the hets, then basically in that scenario I should be producing a 50% chance of visual clowns and a 50% chance of normals, but they will be 100% het because it came from a visual clown. So in other words, I would be producing 2 clowns and 2 normals that are 100% het for that clown. Now, to make it even more fun and even more complicated, if I was to actually take a het, 100% het clown to a 100% clown, that would actually give me a 50% chance of producing 100% hets, a 25% chance of producing a normal, and a 25% chance of producing a clown. In this scenario, this is what we call a 66% het. 66% het basically is as only one of them will be a recessive. The other ones, they will have that normal het, but the only problem is 66, or basically almost half, would be 100% het, and only one would be normal. The only problem is it's not visual. You won't be able to see that. There's no way you can actually tell because the pairing did not come from a visual, but actually came from the 100% het. With this pairing, only one, and there have been odds, or there have been chances that breeders have been lucky enough to actually hit on odds of hitting 3 visuals and 1 66. But like I said, 66 is basically it's either or it's not. Kind of like a 50%, but I'll get into that in a second. But the probabilities of head-to-head pairing, like I said, it would be a 66% het, which means one of them would not be the het for the recessive gene of the clown. Now, if I was to take the het and I was to breed it to a normal, that would actually prove out to be a 50% het. This is what we would call a 50% het for the recessive gene, or 50% het clown. Now, again, the only issues with this is that there's no way you can physically or visibly, better yet said, visibly, there's no way you can actually tell which one would carry the gene. The only way you can actually find that out is you would have to prove it. You would have to prove out that snake to see if in fact it will give you that visual clown. And some breeders, they're reluctant, or not breeders, actually the beginner hobbyists, when they're getting into the recessive projects, they're hesitant because sometimes they just want to go straight visual because they want to avoid all this. They want to avoid all this, but there are those recessive genes that are that expensive because of the difficulty of proving them out, and also because of how new they are in the season. Just to give you an idea, the sunset, the monsoon, these are all relevantly new recessive genes that have been coming out, and they do carry a pretty hefty price tag. And what most breeders actually do is they buy a het. They buy a het and they'll breed it to a normal, and there basically they will get their 50% hets. And obviously the smart thing to do is you have to hold them all back. You hold them all back, and then you're going to have to breed that het that you did have to that 4 that you have left over to see which of those 4 will prove out that visual recessive that you're looking for. Anyway, do not be hesitant or put off by working with recessive projects, because they do pay off in the long term. And these are incredible combos that actually combining it with your codoms. When you're combining with your codoms, your dominants, and your recessive projects, you have a triple play. This is what I like to go when I go to Chili's. I order the triple play. You get the best of all worlds. And that's the idea of when you're working with ball pythons, is actually proving out those beautiful gems and those variety of combos. And if it wasn't for that patience of working with incredible animals, you'll be missing out on making beautiful combos in the near future. Anyway, guys, that's what I have for today. Thank you very much. Again, if you're new to the channel, I would love if you take the time to hit the subscribe button and put whatever comments you like. Again, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.